Our first speaker this afternoon is a man who is never caught without a copy of the Constitution in his coat pocket. He worked in the Iowa Senate to successfully eliminate the inheritance tax, to enforce workplace drug testing, enforce parenting rights, including parental notification of abortion, to pass tax cuts for working Iowans. He was elected to Congress in 2002 to represent Iowa's 5th Congressional District, which is one of the most productive areas in the nation for renewable fuels. He is also a member of the House Judiciary Committee, where he sits on the Constitution Subcommittee and the Immigration Subcommittee. And when FRC Action launched its bus tour throughout Iowa to mobilize values voters, he was extremely helpful and very supportive and participated greatly in this outreach. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the podium as he comes now to share, U.S. Representative Steve King.
Thank you all very, very much. That's a wonderful welcome, and it's a fantastic privilege to have an opportunity to be here today in any capacity. And already, in just walking around the hotel, you've just recharged my faith and my belief in America and the things that have made this a great, great country. I've been asked to speak about the marriage issue and the judicial retention in Iowa. And I would start that out this way, and that is that marriage is, first of all, it's a sacred relationship. It's established by God. All of our human experience points to marriage as being the essential foundation stone to civilization. We pour through marriage all of our values. A man and a woman joined together in holy matrimony, put with them together the values of their faith, all of the cultural values, the religious ethic, the work ethic, the cultural ethic, the foods we eat, the things we do for recreation, all of the things that they found most precious that came from their parents, they do their best to pour through marriage into the children that God blesses them with. Marriage is the essential foundation stone for civilization. It's under assault today, ladies and gentlemen. It's under assault even though it is a sacrament. They have decided that they're going to assault it, and they're doing so not because there's an ulterior value out there. They will just attack everything that we believe in. And I think of this that when about 4 years ago, when Nancy Pelosi first became the Speaker of the House, every year we had to bring up the language that prohibited the funding of abortion in foreign lands, called the Mexico City policy. And it came up again on the floor of the House. And as Chris Smith said so well, we won the debate, but we lost the vote. And I looked across to the other side, and the I'll say pro-abortion people over there they were cheering, they were clapping, they were jumping up and down, they were hugging each other. And I stood and looked across there, and how can anyone have a value that causes them to act like they'd won the conference championship when they've compelled Americans to take their taxpayer dollars and fund abortions in foreign lands? And I thought about that for a long time, and a few days later it finally came through this thick skull of mine. They weren't necessarily cheering because they'd compelled Americans to fund abortions in foreign lands. They were cheering because they knew that they had landed a blow against our values. If we believe in it, they will attack it just because they know it's precious to us. That's why they're attacking marriage too. They have to plow through marriage to get where they're going. And we have to hold marriage together to preserve this article of faith, because it's the foundation stone of the unchallenged greatest nation in the world and all of Western civilization. And to give you a little bit of encouragement, they weren't ignorant about this 100 and some years ago. I looked up a case. It's a Supreme Court case. It's called Maynard v. Hill, 1888, and they wrote on marriage. They said marriage is the foundation. Remember I said foundation stone. The foundation of the family and of society, without which there would be neither civilization nor progress. Supreme Court, 1888. Well, 110 years later, I found myself in the Iowa Senate, and our Iowa marriage laws were under risk from the litigation that had started in Hawaii and was sweeping across this land. Many of you remember those battles that we did. First I thought, why do you have to define marriage in law? And that was one of my first positions. And then as I saw it creeping at us, I understood why. And I was one of the authors of Iowa's Defense of Marriage Act. It's a little different than all the others in the country. The others in the country say marriage shall be between only a man and a woman, or only between one man and one woman. Iowa says that marriage is between one male and one female. That was my doings because I didn't want to get into an argument with the people on the other side on what was a man or a woman. And, and I think it was a good decision. But in any case, that wasn't what really happened. We held that language together, except the Iowa Supreme Court, April 3rd, 2009, unanimously, all 7 Supreme Court justices ruled Iowa's Defense of Marriage Act unconstitutional and by judicial fiat imposed same-sex marriage on Iowa, right in the heart of the heartland. And I guarantee you they were looking at a map of the United States and they painted Iowa red and Massachusetts and a couple other states up in the Northeast the same way. And they said, if we can do this in the heart of the heartland, there's no place in America that they can't impose same-sex marriage. And so that launched an effort to amend the Constitution to undo this. Democrats held both chambers. So last November 2nd, there was a new sheriff in town. It was called the Iowa People. The constituent group that is part of the American people. But here's what happened. Every place that marriage has been voted on between a man and a woman, all 31 times, the American people have stood up and determined marriage is between a man and a woman, or one male and one female in my case. And that would be the case in Iowa too, but we couldn't force the vote because the people in the legislature blocked the vote. And it's hard to amend the Iowa Constitution. But what happened was, 3 of those 7 Supreme Court justices were up on judicial retention. And that is that you can either vote yes, keep them, or no, don't retain them. You get to keep your job or you shall be fired. So a big effort started across the state of Iowa. And there was an effort to save the judges, certainly. Some run by now the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, who appointed most of those judges. He came back to support them. But we also saw FRC, National Organization of Marriage, and every pro-family organization that I can think of was engaged in one way or another. One of the things we did was joined on the judge bus tour, which you heard about in the introduction. And as we went around the state, and we would stop and do stops around the state, and they would come out. We had 20, 40, 60 pro-same-sex marriage advocates that would sometimes get there ahead of us, and they were on the verge of militant. They would come out and they would stand in there and they would scream and yell and curse with the worst profanity I've heard anywhere, and I spent my life in the construction business. They were the most unhappy people I ever met that called themselves gay. And And I remember particularly in Waterloo, Iowa, we pulled the bus up and we had a speaker system and we had a permit, but someone forgot to check the box for a sound system. So they were there with the chief of police of Waterloo and a couple of uniformed officers to make sure that we couldn't use our microphone. And then they surrounded us and they kept pushing in, screaming and yelling and cursing. And so I answered them back as long as I could, and about 20 minutes later, my voice was giving out, and I handed it over to Connie Mackey, and a lot of you know Connie Mackey, and she is a verbal pugilist of the first order, and she gave it back to them better than they were giving it, all with clean language and clean logic, and I had to turn my back to the crowd and push them back away from Connie. They were pushed in her so close. Well, when you see something like that happen, you don't want to let the people on the other side prevail. They're wrong on the Constitution, they're wrong on the moral standard, and they're wrong to conduct themselves that way in a moral society. And that was part of the motivation. But we looked at the polling. One had the judges up by 1 or 2%. We looked at my polling, and we planned on buying a lot of television time, and it looked like I didn't need to do that. So I looked at my advisors around the table and said, what shall we do with this money that we're not going to spend on advertising on me? And they kind of looked at each other and they said, well, we can spread it thin and probably not really change any race, but buy a little goodwill everywhere. Or what if we just pooled it all and put it someplace, where shall it be? And they looked at me like, I know you're thinking about something, but we don't know what. And I said, let's put it against the judges. And so I directed that begin, and I said, let's start buying radio ads. It's the only thing you could get that late in the game. And we drove to a friendly radio station, sat down and borrowed their studio, and 3.5 hours later, we'd produced a commercial. And while that was going on, we were already buying time on radios. And so we bought every radio station in the state of Iowa that you could buy. And I'm not taking credit for this, believe me. The good Lord directs us, and he directed many people to do the right thing. But the most rewarding race that I was involved in last November was the judges. And it was rewarding for all that were engaged in it. And those judges, all three of them, including Marcia Turnus, the Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court, and Justice Baker and Strite, were turned out of office by a percentage of 54 to 46. And we, the people, had spoken. We'd spoken on the right moral values, we'd spoken on the right constitutional values, and we'd organized, and people came out. That's what we can do, Americans. We are never muzzled. We are never silent. There's always another way. And we get beat when we give up, when we lose our spirit, when we think it's hopeless, when we think that this victory that'll be God's victory is going to come in our time. Well, it might, but it's going to come in his time, when he's ready. And our measure is, did we develop the gifts he gave us? Did we utilize them? Did we serve him every day and ask for him to loan us the measure of his wisdom for that day? If we do that, then his victory will come graciously in his time, and we won't be held accountable for not having used those gifts that he gave us. So I'm really grateful for all of those that pitched in on this. I just want to throw this little aside in that Tony Perkins was getting a little grief for not being an Iowan. They were yelling at him, go back home, we don't need any out-of-state interests, this is an Iowa issue. And so finally, the next time I introduced Tony Perkins, I said, Tony Perkins is a Marine, he was in the Senate in Louisiana, and he's here in Iowa for the same reason that Davy Crockett went to Texas. We need the help. We need the help. And so we have that kind of success, and these were the judges that wrote in their decisions that they had found rights in the Constitution that were up to this point unimagined. And they wrote that a man and a man were similarly situated to a man and a woman. And I'm trying to figure out why they had trouble with that. It's pretty simple to me. I think if Joe the plumber had been on that bus, they might have understood it. So... But we fought a good battle, so I just want to take in the minutes that are left a way to tie this together on where we sit here in this country. And I'd ask you to think about America. I think about after September 11th, we created a cockpit door for a plane so that hijackers couldn't crack through that door and take the plane over. We built a lot of those. We patented it here in the United States. The Chinese bought exactly one. And they reverse engineered it. They took it home, took it apart, started building their own, and stole the intellectual property. Now, I use that to define what reverse engineering is. Now I'll challenge you with this. Could you reverse engineer the United States of America and come up with a better result than what we have here? Could you go back through history and turn us in history in any way where our mortal wisdom could supersede the actual history that we've experienced as a country? I'd say not. I believe that the Bible was written with divine inspiration. I believe the Declaration was written with divine guidance. I believe that God moved the founding fathers around this country and the globe like men on a chessboard. I believe this country was ordained and built by his hand. And I believe that we are living a continuum of history that's rooted back a long ways back in history to at least the time of Christ that the formation of Western civilization began. And you can think about the Greeks in the Age of Reason because that foundation of thought was helpful. But go to Rome and think about the Roman rule of law. How important it is the rule of law being an essential pillar of American exceptionalism here today. Think about Christ standing before the high priest Caiaphas when the high priest said to him, "Did you really say those things? Did you really preach those things?" And Jesus turned to the Jews and he said, "Ask them, they were there. They saw it." And the guard struck Jesus. And Jesus then turned to the high priest and he said, "If I speak wrongly, then you must prove the wrong. And if I speak rightly, then why do you punish me?" Christ asserted two principles, two basic tenets of the American rule of law in that encounter. One of them was his right to face his accusers, the Jews, and the other one was he was innocent until proven guilty. The foundation of America goes back to at least that moment, and the things that we learned about redemption and the wonderful gift that Christ gave this world. And as it flowed through Western civilization and died out during the Dark Ages and came back again, what arrived at America? People came here for religious freedom and liberty. And if it had been any other people to do so, we wouldn't be this free Judeo-Christian nation that we are today. But as the Puritans arrived here to express their religious liberty, they brought with them Old English common law, which was rooted in Roman rule of law. And they brought with them the concept of redemption that Christ gave us. And all of that planted here in the New World at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution and planted as the age of English-speaking Western civilization enlightenment arrived here on a continent that had, at that time at least, unlimited natural resources, no taxes, no regulation. Throw that in there, that makes me feel good. And no taxes and no regulation, a profound belief in Jesus Christ as our Savior, a moral compass that guided them so they didn't need to have a massive law enforcement or a lot of laws or rules or regulations to guide them. They were guided by their moral faith. And all of that with all those natural resources and manifest destiny to settle this continent from sea to shining sea. Look at the miracle that has arisen and the people that he put in place to take us there. And the concept that's in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those just aren't phrases that were designed to make somebody feel good so they'd sign on to the Declaration. Those were carefully prioritized rights. They were so carefully prioritized that when you look through that, pursuit of happiness, that's actually off of a Greek term. And the pursuit of happiness was not seen as a tailgate party or going to the football game or going fishing or whatever you might do, a soccer game in the front yard. Pursuit of happiness was pursuit of excellence, pursuit of development, intellectual and spiritual development to become a complete and whole human being. That was what pursuit of happiness meant to the Founding Fathers when they put that in the Declaration. And so that's the third priority, however. The second priority is liberty. And many of our liberties are laid out in the Bill of Rights. Freedom of speech, religion, and the press, and right to keep and bear arms, and property rights, and no double jeopardy, which I mentioned. Those liberties that we have cannot be trampled by someone else's pursuit of happiness any more than someone's pursuit of happiness can trample on a human life. Life's the number one priority, and it needs to be protected with all of the faith and belief that we have. And we need to exercise. And we need to teach our children. They need to understand two things when the question of abortion arises. One of them is, do you believe human life is sacred in all of its forms? Yes is our answer as a society, as a people. Any thinking people say human life is sacred in all of its forms. The only other question you have to ask and answer then is, at what instant does life begin? And we all know it's the instant of conception. And when that baby is conceived, that's a miracle that God has put together that's unique, and it's a gift to mom and dad in that marriage, joined together in holy matrimony. It's a gift to the world. It's a solution for the problems that we have today. And when it's an American born to that holy union between a man and a woman, that's also a patriotic individual that can receive the best that has to offer from mom and dad and their church and their communities. All of those values will one day pour through into their marriage to be raised their children. And each generation builds on another. That great, great gift of life that's the highest priority that we have. Second to that, by the Declaration, is liberty. And we can do all things to expand our liberty, provided we don't trample on life. And we can do all things to expand our pursuit of excellence, pursuit of happiness, but not in such a way that we trample on liberty or on life. And I just think it's so profound to understand that the Founding Fathers knew that. I believe they knew that when they wrote that into the Declaration. It's far too logical to be random. And I believe they were moved around like men on a chessboard to shape this nation. And the divine guidance that's laid this out for us, this giant petri dish of this experiment of this robust Western civilization, Western Christendom, as Winston Churchill called it, is a great gift to the world. We're the readout of civilization. We are the ones that have to stand and hold strong when the rest of the world is lined up against us. And we need to cherish those pillars of American exceptionalism, understand our history, how we got here, and have great reverence for what I believe is a fact that no one could reverse engineer the United States of America and produce a product better than one that has been put together by God and our Founding Fathers. And so, if we go forth with great confidence every day, we will emerge again as a gift to the succeeding generations as we are gifted by the preceding generations. Thank you all very, very much. God bless you all, and God bless America.